Today's chat is brought to you by the support of all our Twitch subscribers. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through the Twitch platform, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a subscriber of the FFC and gaining access to some exclusive features over in the Discord server, please be sure to visit our Twitch account and click on the subscribe button. If you're an Amazon Prime member, remember that you do have a free subscription to Twitch every month that can be used for this. And for those of you who are already subscribers, thank you again for your generosity. You may have heard the whispers of guardians gathering in the shadows, exploring the mysteries of this world and the worlds which surround us. We are all in search of truth. Sometimes we need to focus that search, focus that fire. And so we come together. Join us. Join the discussion. Welcome to Focused Fire Chat. Welcome back for episode 153 of Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on December 30th over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. As always, want to give a big shout out to our live chat here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Our topic for tonight's episode is going to be a look at the Black Armory and Forges. But first, let's run through a quick introduction of those on the show for tonight. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86. Next up, we have our own master of social media, the one and only Green-Eyed Music Lover. Green, I hope you're doing well. How has the week and the holidays treated you so far?
It has been a bit of a roller coaster, to be honest. And this episode is going to kind of reflect that a tiny bit, just because there's been some things that normally I do that I wasn't able to do because of a kind of a crisis in the family. The holiday itself went really, really well. Julie and I went up to a ski resort, essentially. We didn't stay at the resort, but we went up to some hot springs by the resort and spent Christmas kind of together, just the two of us, which was really, really nice. And then got back and had a friend of the family have a heart attack. And so I've actually been dealing with going to the hospital a lot the last couple of days, since about Thursday. And she is a little bit of an older woman who has a very specific type of thing that happened for the heart attack. It's not your typical clogged artery type thing. She has the lining of the wall of her artery basically started unzipping, which is super, super rough and hard to fix. But anyway, it's been a little hectic, so I don't have question of the week this week, and I also don't have a summary because of spending so much time working on that and basically frustrated and praying about that the whole time. But yeah, other than that, it's been a pretty decent week.
Yeah, no, and I know we were chatting about that. I think was that yesterday we were chatting about how everything was going. So same thing that we were saying yesterday, though, you know, prayers and thoughts, and let any one of us know if there's anything we can do, obviously, to help out with that, because that's never any medical situation like that, you know, just never fun.
Yeah, it's just stressful for everybody involved.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can only imagine too. Because, well, and it also, yeah. I mean, it being a specific, like, you guys know what it is, but there's not really, like, that both helps and hurts a little bit. I think is the weird, like, it puts it in a weird position too.
Yeah, and there's a lot of kind of things that you wish you could have said beforehand to help.
Right.
Prevent it, even though theoretically you couldn't help prevent it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, just ups and downs with it.
Man, all right.
Yeah, say hindsight is 20/20 after all's said and done.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Well, real quick, rounding out the usual team, we have our good buddy, the lore content cop, Beard Grizzly. Beard, how are you doing? How has the holidays been for you?
Is it over?
Almost.
Nearly.
Is it
Nearly.
over?
It's
We have
really
3 more
about to get.
days.
It's really about to get bad tomorrow. What? It's like the last weekend of the year. I know a lot of places are doing tax-free sales. What? What?
Wait, do they do that thing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
man. I just
yeah.
I just got a couple things. The only reason I know that is because I just went in to get. I had to get a new TV screen because my TV screen finally, like after 7.5, 8 years, the TV finally just went bleh and died.
Huh.
So I had to go get a new one, and while I was there, we went to Nebraska Furniture Mart, which, by the way, is like the biggest trap for me ever. It is. I go in, and I'm usually not allowed to go in without an adult accompanying me, mainly my wife, because I'll walk out with stuff like I walked out today. I walked in to get a TV, and I walked out with a TV, a new monitor, and a vacuum cleaner. But the nice thing is I don't have to pay super high taxes on it, and it's all financed because they're doing their big final end of the year push, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yeah, it's about that time of the year. Everybody's and granted, it's going to carry over a little bit with January, February, but like right now is about the best time because everybody's getting ready for like newer products to be put in stores, etc.
Well, that
That's
and
true.
everyone just had the holiday influx of cash, right? You know, for those who got the gifts, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I had seen something earlier. Granted, of course, I follow phone news because, of course, I do. But the big thing I saw was like the Galaxy series of phones from this year went on like a huge price crash.
Yeah, they
which
did.
I find kind of funny because they're either trying to give them out and get rid of them for another model, which could might actually double solidify the thought that the Note 11 might be coming earlier than anticipated.
Yay!
But anyway.
I am.
Well, and after the problems they had with the 8 or the what is it the
7. The 7
7.
was the really
not the
bad
7,
one.
the Sport 8.
My
sister
the
had
active,
the charge, the active one, the charging thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like apparently the charging port on the active 8 just stopped working.
Yeah, it doesn't hold up well, but that's pretty common for early USB-C, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Anyway, don't get me started on phones. I'll be here all night. But yeah, otherwise, the holidays went pretty well. My biggest gift actually was a Switch.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I haven't necessarily had the funds to do so, but I was surprised Christmas Day with that, and I was just like, oh wow, this is
Nice.
not what I expected.
Did you get any games?
Yeah,
with
it was. I did. They ended up getting me Super Smash Brothers.
Nice.
And they got me Let's Go Pokemon, the Eevee version.
Oh, you got Eevee?
Yep. And I ended up getting earlier though, which is kind of ironic. We had Starlink on sale, which is basically an Ubisoft space fighter that they came out with for all the consoles. But they have the Star Fox version that was on the Switch. So I ended up picking it up, but mainly because it had the R-Wing with it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have probably bothered. But it was just kind of ironic because all of a sudden I had the Switch and I had that.
Isn't that the one that has, it's like the Skylanders type thing? Like it's got the little action figure? Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at, there was something on
the ship on the fly, which is pretty cool. You can actually take pieces on and off from the ships themselves, and it'll actually reflect that in-game. But it's like an insta-swap kind of idea. You dock the Joy-Cons into this controller base, and you have a pilot that you seat in, you have a ship you put over top of it, and then you have up to 2 weapons that you place on it too. And the cool thing with the R-Wing, they actually have they have it where it'll just shoot regular the standard laser blast that it does out of Star Fox, which is pretty cool. If you don't have anything equipped.
Huh. Yeah, because I was at like I said, I was at Nebraska Furniture Mart today, and they had one of the controller adapters for the Xbox,
Yeah.
And I was like, what in the? Because it's got exactly what you're saying. It's got like 2 tier, like it's just crazy looking. You put it on top of the Xbox controller, and it slides all these like little mini things. And I was like, so that's I was curious about what that exactly was. That's really kind of cool.
Yeah, and the game itself isn't half bad either. And now that I get that all out there, it's a very standard open world game. It's obvious that the biggest gimmick is just like the controller and being able to like customize the ship and level up and so on. I also wasn't expecting that there was going to be like a whole ton of stuff going on with Star Fox. No, they actually have an entire story based for him too.
Oh wow!
Which is like more respect than what Nintendo has given that character in years. Which is terrible of me to say, but also truthful of me to say. But yeah, I'm very surprised with what Ubisoft did. I'm kind of anxious to play that one a little more. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Nice.
But Smash is just an absolute blast. I ended up picking up Zelda then too a little later. Breath of the Wild is just freaking beautiful.
Yeah, I was looking at Smash. They found. Did you see the glitch with the infinite Luigis? Or
yeah,
no,
they also...
Is it infinite? Is it Luigi or is it Waluigi?
Waluigi.
Or what? Yeah.
They also have another glitch with what's his name, with Villager, where you can actually crash the game by pocketing things too much, and actually like playing catch back and forth. After a while, it gets too powerful and it just shuts down the engine.
Oh, so before we get completely sidetracked,
really,
there's guys. I'm not gonna lie. I told Beard and Green this earlier before I left for vacation, but Xbox Game Pass has just blown it out of the water this month, and then it sounds like in January they're bringing even more stuff on. Like I'm not joking. Geez, man, I am so set for solo games that I'm so happy. So if you guys, if you guys haven't checked out, if you're on the Xbox platform and if you haven't checked out Game Pass, I definitely would encourage, at least giving it a glance. Really, really cool app. And I think they're kind of doubling down on it this next year. So that's going to be really cool too.
Well, they're getting set for their new systems as well, because I think that's going to be the big thing on the horizon.
I've started hearing all the murmurs of that.
Yeah. In addition to that, like it sounds like a good majority of everything is going to be more like cloud-based or backwards-based or etc. So
which is nice,
especially with most systems that we have today being based on x86 anyway. It's going to be easy for backwards compatibility to be more of a thing, which will be great.
Yeah. So before we get distracted by, like I said, next week we'll be talking about a game that's not Destiny, but this week we're going to try to focus back on Destiny. So let's run through.
I'm gonna say, can you guys tell that we haven't been able to talk to each other for a week pretty heavily?
Is it obvious? Is it obvious I have been not without internet for a week? So I know everyone is looking forward to diving into the discussion, especially since this is a pretty new topic in Destiny. So let's run through our standard intro notes and then we'll get right into it. In our last episode of Focus Fire Chat, we discussed Mara Sov. If you ever miss an episode and would like to catch up, please be sure to check out FocusFireChat.com for archives, articles, and links to the other aspects of Focus Fire Chat. If you don't mind, please rate and, if you can, leave a review of the show on iTunes, Podbean, or whichever podcasting app you use to enjoy podcasts. Reviews are extremely helpful as they not only let us know what we can do better, but help us stay on the charts, which helps others find our amazing community. To those of you who have already taken the time to leave us a review, thank you. As many of you already know, Focus Fire Chat is a cross-community gathering where the intent is to offer a week-long, in-depth view of a particular subject from within the lore of Destiny and other games. This chat begins every Tuesday morning and runs until the following Tuesday, with topics decided by the group via a poll that begins every Friday and ends on the Tuesday morning of the new chat. Every Friday at around 10 p.m. Central, we get together to stream a high-level summary of the previous week's chat for those who were unable to participate. Please be sure to also give some support to the other podcasts in the Guardian Radio Network, links of which can be found on our website. If you're a fan of lore in all its various forms, be sure to also check out thelorenetwork.com, where you can find a wide variety of some amazing content that covers a number of different titles and mediums. Our next chat is going to be a discussion on the extra lore topic for December, Dishonored. However, as always, please be sure to weigh in on the poll this weekend to let us know which topic you want to discuss after that. Links of that poll can be found on either Twitter @FocusFireChat or within our Discord server. Before we jump into the information and thoughts that the community had about the Black Armory and Forges, however, let's have a quick chat about this week's Lost Lore. All right, so for Lost Lore, not Last Lore, Lost Lore, I figured we'd probably kind of look at the mythology in the name, which is going to be kind of, in full disclosure, going to be discussed in detail in general in this episode, but just I wanted to run through a quick summary, I guess, real quick on that. And so this is really focusing down on the forges. So we'll be talking about the Black Armory here in a second, but the forges in particular, and I'm just going to run through them really quick alphabetically, and we'll get, like I said, we're definitely going to get into detail more with the mythology a little bit here. But for the first one is, so we have about, what is that? Four forges. Wow, say that 5 times fast. Mm-hmm. 4 forges. And then we have the additional, it's not a forge. It's kind of like I think they're introducing it as kind of like a dungeon type thing in Niobe Labs. We're going to talk about the Niobe Labs because that's actually really important to Black Armory and the forges as well. So to kind of go back, the forges are Bergusia, Gofannon, Izanami, and Volundr. So the interesting thing for me that I kind of geeked out about this before I went, like I said, before I went dark for holiday, there's a lot of mythology here, and I'm going to actually try to include information links. Most of them, they actually have some really good articles over on Britannica for these particular mythological figures, and so I'll be including those links in our show notes on the website. So definitely, if you guys have any interest in some of the etymology or the semantics of this particular piece, definitely check those out. But real quick, to kind of walk down, we have 2 Celtic deities, a Norse deity, a Japanese or a Shinto deity, and then a Greek deity. And actually, of the 2 Celtics, one of them, Gofannon. No, wait. I backed that up. Volundr is not the deity, and that's the Norse one. So Bergusia is actually the one that we don't have a lot of information on, and this is actually arguably because we don't have any. We only have, I believe, one historical reference for this entity. And so Bergusia is believed to be a Celtic goddess who is connected to a god named, I'm going to butcher this name, Eusebius, and these were both worshipped in Alesia and Burgundy. Now, Eusebius was a male figure who was shown bearing a hammer, while Bergusia was portrayed as a goddess of prosperity. And the real connection here to the forges is because this was all found, this location of this image was on an urn that was found in a pile of rubble that was believed to have been a stock of metalsmiths, though they do also think that it could possibly have been a sanctuary for the local, what's called craft deities. Craft deities were basically exactly what they kind of sound. They're kind of like house gods in the Roman era. But for the Celtics, they kind of focus more on specific crafts, so metalsmithing and forging and prosperity, which would be like farming and stuff like that. That's kind of a craft deity. Gofannon, real quick, is actually the Welsh equivalent of a Celtic smith god. That smith god, I'm again going to butcher this name, is Gofannon. which is translated into Divine Smith. We're going to talk about him in quite a bit of detail when we get to him, because there's actually quite a bit of information about him. But the connection there is obviously he was an actual god of the smith, which is a type of forge. To jump to Izanami, actually Deej and Bife actually talked about this, I believe, earlier this week. They kind of mentioned this. Izanami is a part of a couple. Is Izanami and Izanagi, I think is how you pronounce that. The Japanese
Izanagi, I think,
Izanagi. Okay.
To it. I'll see if I can get better pronunciation on that.
Yeah,
that
chat.
About right.
Chat just gave me the best thing. A craft deity is the blue collar gods. I love that. That's actually that's pretty accurate. Izanami is translation is she who invites, and Izanagi is he who invites. Their full names are Izanagi no Mikoto and Izanami no Mikoto, and they are actually central deities in the Japanese creation myth, and we'll be getting into a little bit of detail about that as well later. And then that brings us to Volundr. Volundr is actually not a deity. Volundr is a figure who shows up in the Poetic Edda as a legendary master blacksmith. So he is a, for lack of a better word, he is a mortal. I guess he could kind of be construed as a demigod in a way because of some of the things that he does. But basically, he is a one of three brothers who were the sons of a Finnish king, and the big thing that they did was he was a master blacksmith, which in the Norse world is a very, very important thing, because obviously it was a very war-centric culture. And each one of him and his two brothers each married a Valkyrie. So the big thing there was that was a very big honor for them. However, those wives were kidnapped, and there is a big story that Volundr and his brothers Egil and Slagfjor, I think is how you pronounce his other brother's name. So Egil and Slagfjor actually pursued their wives, and Volundr stayed behind to await for his wife's return. And while he was waiting, he went through a number of projects in which he fashioned 700 rings from red gold and strung them up on ropes. And then there's this huge story of how he kind of was tortured. He was captured and then tortured, and then kind of had his revenge, and created these masterful kind of inventions in order to enact his revenge upon the people who were not just hurting him, but hurting his family. It's very Norse. It's very violent, but we will kind of get into that a little bit too, because he's actually really kind of, I actually had a lot of fun digging into his story. Oh, sorry. Dino is saying on the Izanagi and Izanami, there is a quote that is attributed to, I believe it's Izanagi said that I will see 1,000 people die per day. And Izanami responded with, well, then I will see 1,500 people born a day, or I will see, whatever. However, so they're kind of a yin and yang, dark and light kind of composition. Go for it.
Within a lot of Japanese, or realistically in a lot of Asian or East Asian culture, the idea of like the yin and yang and so on is pretty commonplace,
right.
If you will,
Yeah.
or at least balance is very commonplace. Another one that is also fitting of that story, which I kind of reminded myself of as well, is the stories of the two legendary swords, Masamune and Masamune.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those actually are very calculated in the same way of like dark versus light, and how one of them, each if placed, if you're not familiar with the story behind them, when placed inside of a river, one would, and I can't remember which, but one would chop the leaves that it would come in contact with. The other would cause them to just go around it. So one was the Heaven's Blade, the other was the Devil's Blade. But it's a very common signifier within a lot of like East Asian story writing.
Yeah, and their story also, it's a creation myth for the, I believe it's the Shinto, or the Shinto, and so the creation myth is very detailed. It's very extravagant, which is very common for a lot of creation myths. And I'm gonna try to figure out if we have some time. I'll actually kind of want to talk about it and maybe read the excerpts that we got from that I have from Britannica about it, because it's a really fascinating story. But really quick, just to kind of finish up summaries, Niobe was the daughter of Tantalus and was the wife of the king of Thebes, Amphion. She's arguably the prototype of a bereaved mother. And this is all coming from the Iliad. She had basically 12 children, 6 sons and 6 daughters, and kind of made the mistake of boasting about her superiority to a Titan, Leto, who was the mother of the twins Apollo and Artemis. And well, because of that, because she offended their mother, Apollo killed all of Niobe's sons and Artemis killed all her daughters, which then led to Niobe kind of being like I said, the prototype of the bereaved mother, the kind of just the sorrow and the rending of grief, and so there's a lot of connections there with Niobe and what the project Niobe actually is built around, and what the Niobe Labs, from what we can tell so far from what we have in game, is kind of involved with. But so that's kind of a quick summary of those different things. And like I said, I didn't want to get too far into depth with them just yet, because I want to have some stuff to go over later in the episode. But I did want to give a big or a big nod to the mythology in those names, because there's a lot of in-depth stuff there. I don't think I missed anything. Did you guys have anything else that I should go over in the summary before we dive into the actual Black Armory?
Just more to highlight that, yes, there may have been some distinctive quotes between like Izanami, I know I'm butchering the pronunciation on it and whatnot, and Izanagi, but the largest thing is basically about the creation myth, which ties back largely to Black Armory, like heavily so. And of course we're going to find out why here if you're not familiar very quickly. But just to re-highlight some things, since that kind of got a little muddied for us here through chat and whatnot, that the creation mythos is the main factor within most of these, and granted, with most of the forges, that's the base idea with a lot of the forges is just the idea of creation. Because what do you do within a forge? You create. One is possibly for death, one is more for life, and so on. So just something else to kind of keep in mind as like an overall, as we talk about like what a forge is all about, or what the Black Armory's main goals may have been, even if it started that way and maybe shifted. Things needed to alter. But anyway, creation is not simple, nor is death. That is all. Moving on.
Yeah, no, and especially, and Green and I are kind of chatting that real quick too. Norse, like the three kind of cultures that we're seeing here, which is the Norse, the Celtic, actually the 4, Norse, Celtic-ish, Greek, and then the Japanese. All of these cultures are very, very sophisticated in their mythos. So, kind of, it's difficult to kind of give a summary, because each of these summaries will then tie into another mythology or another myth, and that ties into another myth, which is the equivalent of another myth, and there's just like, it's all knotted together in this really complex weave which is the beauty of mythos. Like, that's the beauty of mythology in general. But as you get cultures that are more and more sophisticated, especially like the Japanese, the Greeks, and even to a degree the Norse, which is largely kind of, I think, oversimplified in a lot of people's minds. The Norse had very complex cultures. Same with the Celtics. The Celts had an immensely complex culture.
They weren't just Vikings, rawr.
No, I think the misunderstanding there is that they were a largely vocal culture, where the others, thankfully, we didn't go through dark ages as harshly with the Japanese culture. The Greeks kind of did a little bit, but not to the extent that the European area did. But the information that we have retained from that is complex, even more so because we don't have the full story. I was actually listening to a podcast earlier this last week that I had saved that was talking about the mythos of Loki. And the problem with these myths is that for those particular cultures, we only have one or two sources really to kind of pull from. And that makes it very difficult to kind of delve too deeply, especially since these particular sources are referencing other sources that we don't have access to. So there were other sources, we just don't have them because they've been destroyed, which is really, really sad. But so there's also that type of degree that these are very complex cultures in reality. And so some of the mythology that we're going to be talking about, here and throughout the episode as well, is going to be grossly oversimplified. And I really encourage, if you have any interest in like diving into these more, like I said, I'm going to put the Britannica links that I was able to find for the forge, the names in the forges. And please feel free to shoot us an email or a message over on Discord or Twitter if you want to, continue the dive into a particular subject, or you want to talk about the connections to other myths. I think any one of us would absolutely love to have that conversation. But real quick, so to introduce the Black Armory, we kind of get a really good or a really good summary from a piece of equipment called the Woven Firesmith Boots. This is actually a piece of armor that belongs to the Hunter armor set, which is the Woven Firesmith armor set. But the boots, we see a quote that says, "The Black Armory represents the ingenuity and tenacity of humanity. We do not bend easily, and we will not surrender our home while drawing breath." And we also have this quote that we've seen quite a bit of in a lot of the posting from Bungie itself, where it's reclaim, reignite, reforge. So there's a lot of emphasis put on the forge, this creation, this reignition, the reignition of these forges, igniting a forge. And that kind of begs
the quest is to go back and get an igniter repaired.
Right, yeah, which and that kind of begs the question of, what are the forges? Well, before we can talk about that, we really kind of need to talk about what is the Black Armory. And the Black Armory really kind of it was a group of humans who tried to prepare without the help of the Traveler. So we saw this already a little bit with the Awoken, right? We saw this with Yang Lewei. So similar in nature to those humans who were on the Yang Lewei, these people actually stayed on Earth instead of fleeing. The founders of the Armory saw humanity's response to the arrival of the Traveler as one that was really much too naive, and they saw the life that it led, or that response led to, as what they would refer to as comfortable complacency. They had a problem with letting the means to defend themselves reside in the hands of something as alien and unknown as the Traveler. And so they basically got together and decided that they were going to create a group that would create the means to defend themselves against attack, because obviously there are aliens out there that the presence of the Traveler confirmed, and not all those aliens might be friendly, which, that was confirmed. It's very similar to Rasputin's ideals. The founders of the Black Armory are really three individuals that we kind of find through the works of the Black Armory papers. And Real quick, Black Armory papers, we're not going to delve too far into them in this episode. I actually have an episode or a topic on the poll to dive specifically into the Black Armory papers, because that story is much more focused on Ada than necessarily the overall armory as a I don't want to say political group, but like a faction, I guess would be the best word for it. So we will be referencing the papers, but we're not going to probably get into too much detail as far as the papers. So first up, the first person who you should probably be familiar with as far as the Black Armory is Henriette. This is the initial founder of the Black Armory, and she was the mother to a girl or a daughter. Her daughter was Adelaide, whose transformation is actually the sole point of the Black Armory papers. That's really the focal point of the Black Armory papers. The next individual who you should probably recognize, or that you should keep in mind, is Yuki, who is an engineer who basically was the Black Armory's science and mechanics specialist. So she was kind of the individual who everyone kind of came up with the ideas, and then they brought them to Yuki, and she was the one that kind of figured out how to make those ideas reality. And then the final person is Helga. And this is going to be Beard's favorite person, because Helga was a former employee of Clovis Bray.
Also
Helga,
the one that tends to piss everybody off, apparently, too.
Yes. And but the reason why she pisses everyone off is because she serves as the Black Armory's business manager. And so her job was to kind of go out and get business for the Black Armory, and to kind of make sure that they were a business and they were profitable. And sometimes the decisions or the ideas that she came back with, Henriette and Yuki might not necessarily agree with. One of those instances was actually the project known as Project Niobe. A crucial part of Project Niobe was actually the idea of bringing exoscience back to Earth, because we have confirmation from, I believe it's the Jotun, which is the ship, that basically Helga was the person who kind of was playing the intermediary between the Black Armory and Clovis Bray. So Helga wanted to take the technology that they had at Black Armory and marry it up with the exoscience advances that Clovis Bray had, in order to create a device known as the Obsidian, Obsidian Accelerator, which we'll get into just a little bit. But that was all of Helga's kind of main project. And so that project was Project Niobe. And so we had a couple cool little confirmations there. First off, exos were not being created on Earth until Project Niobe and the Niobe labs, which is kind of an interesting thing. And then second off, Black Armory actually was on a level that Clovis Bray seems to have some respect for them. And not respect in so far as like, oh, they're friendly towards them, but respect as like they were actually bartering with them to do business with them instead of just buying them out forthright. So that kind of gives you an idea as far as like a business model that Black Armory was actually able to stand on its own pretty well, to not be bought out.
Also seemingly relying on Clovis Bray to a point, or at least showcasing that Clovis was such a large integrated faction for security throughout the system. But there were a couple things that were sort of referenced with that too within the papers.
Right. And the thing is like there was a lot of kind of murmuring back and forth between, I think it's Henriette and Helga, about, the expansion, the speed of expansion that the Black Armory was seeing. Because, and we see this especially in the papers, because Henriette is kind of lamenting how open they were with humanity and how they shouldn't have trusted humanity and all this stuff. But yeah, that's kind of my kind of introductory summary of Black Armory and the founders. Was there anything else you guys wanted to dive into before we kind of jumped into the forges?
I mean, they were making these weapons to help humanity stave off without the help of Guardians. At least that's what it turned into eventually.
Yeah, I gotta say it was... I've always attributed Daito as like the manufacturer that helped with a lot of civilian made equipment.
Oh.
And here it kind of turns into Black Armory being that kind of individual or that build.
But Beard, yes. Did you see the crates that are in the Black Armory room in the tower?
Yes, I saw them.
Okay.
I mean, Daito in general is just proliferated all over the place within the tower.
But specifically, they're in there.
Yeah, but there are a few that are otherwise elsewhere within the hangar and so on. But I do find it funny that they are actually kind of together. But of course, that comes down to some Spinfoil and so on. But anyway, I'll actually get to a special bit of Spinfoil that I have on the forges themselves in terms of construction once we get to that portion. But several things kind of lead me to believe why the Black Armory itself needs to also operate without Clovis Spray's overall influence. And I think that comes down to some past series that, of course, have been more of an overarching of recent as well, especially ever since Warmind. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I've actually found myself like really intrigued with the Black Armory as a whole. It's easily, I think, one of the best expansion pieces of material we've had in a long time. And it's not even like full-blown expansion, which I find absolutely wonderful. So big props to Bungie for this story, because just in general, I've been enjoying it.
So we want to jump into the forges?
Let's do it.
Good thing.
Okay. So, real quick, what is a forge? For those who might not know, forge is basically the equivalent of a smithy, which probably, if you don't know what a forge is, that's probably not going to make it any clearer. So a smithy or a forge, it's a furnace or a shop with a furnace, where basically you take metal, you heat it up, and you basically rot it into something. So it's usually a workshop where iron is produced or where iron is made malleable and then made into things. Think of a blacksmith. That is going to be your most obvious thing. The tools that a blacksmith uses, that big bellows that lights a fire and they put the metal in and then they pour it into a crucible, all these different things, that is going to be the forge. The other thing, though, is that forge is often, it's a bit of a word that has a lot of different meanings, right? So you have the forge that you actually make metal in, and you make metal more malleable. To forge something also means to form something such as metal by heating or hammering, or to form something by a mechanical or hydraulic process or press with or without heat. So you don't necessarily need heat to forge something. And the final one that I kind of want to bring up is to forge something also means to form or bring into being something, especially by an expenditure of effort, which kind of ties into how we interact with the forges. We kind of expend effort. I think that would be a pretty accurate term, or pretty accurate explanation of how you ignite the forges, right? Would you guys agree with that?
With the little charge orbs that you have to throw at it?
Yeah, I mean, more about the effort that is put into it.
I mean, yeah, there's effort.
I'm just thinking of the first forge and everyone's effort to get that one initially lit.
Yeah, I find it funny that it only takes like 20 minutes now to get a weapon for.
Oh yeah, honestly. Now that everyone's figured it out, yeah. So that kind of brings us into the different forges. Two of which are actually located on Exodus Black. I believe that is the Gofannon and the Izanami forges are on Exodus Black.
Which funny that. Anyway.
Bergusia. Where was Bergusia? Do we have that one? We have access to that one, right?
No.
Is that okay? That's the final one. That's the final one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the one we don't have yet.
Yeah,
okay, perfect.
It's the last one that I know we don't, and then of course we've got Niobe, but Niobe's a little.
Niobe's opening on
one, but that's
January 8th, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So.
And then Volundr.
Wait on. Yeah.
Right. Volundr was the
one
first.
that is currently on
Yes.
Earth, yeah.
Okay, so
Because
Volundr is on
Volundr
Earth.
is-
Perfect. Okay, cool.
Volundr's in the EDZ. Gofannon is in the Artifacts, or is it Artifacts Edge?
Yeah.
On Nessus, and then Izanami is not the Hollows. What is it? It's also in Nessus.
Yeah, I forget now where it is. I can look it up here after I'm done killing Thyrodon. But there's the two that were on Black
Exodus Black, right?
Freaking ridiculous to me.
Well, but it confirms that Black Armory was in cahoots with the Exodus project. Which also
makes me wonder about a certain other ship. Anyway.
Right. But I mean, it also does make sense if you think about what the Exodus project was doing, right? They would need a weaponsmith. Like, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. You have Siva to build stuff and a forge to create things that you might need to defend yourself because you don't know where you're going.
I mean, never mind the fact that, don't read anything into like how Hammerhead is built or how freaking Kindled Orchid is built up or anything like that at all either.
Don't. Shh. It's okay, Beard.
Anyway, I'm having slight. I've been having like. I find it very particular and funny. Now, granted, Thunderlord was a very popular LMG, of course, back in the day. But the fact that they did bring that one back and they tied it in with the Black Armory in some way. I think that was more on purpose than anything else. Really think so. Anyway, it's gonna be really easy to get me down the rabbit hole with this one because, like I said, Black Armory is like really like it turns some gears. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, and I think that's kind of the point too, right? Is that this is a mysterious faction. We don't know a lot about the Black Armory by design. And so I find that's also fascinating in and of itself.
To top, of course, we've also got all the stuff that's related back to it, thanks to like the collapse and whatnot as well. So
right.
I think that's my biggest ticking point is just we have information on that now again, finally.
So real quick, Bergusia, I kind of already pretty much gave you the information that we have about Bergusia. That's all from that. I mean, literally, that's in reality, that is the information we have about the term Bergusia. She was a Celtic goddess, believed to be the consort of a Celtic god who went by the name of Eusictus. They were worshipped. Both of them were worshipped in Elysia and Burgundy. And basically the only appearance of these two were on an urn that was found within basically a pile of rubbish in an underground room. So this is all coming from Wikipedia actually has this listed, but it's quoting back to the Dictionary of Celtic Myth and Legend. So I will include that link. I try really hard not to quote Wikipedia, but actually that was actually one of the best ones. I tried to find the actual quote from the Dictionary of Celtic Myth. I couldn't get access to it, sadly, to get a link. So if you guys have that link, please let me have it, because I would love to actually read into, see if there's actually more information on that one. I also find it accurate because Bergusia is the one that we don't have access to, and we don't know really anything about in-game as well. So, I find that kind of appropriate.
It's like things are on purpose or something.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, it's like these were thought out. Storyboard.
What about storyboarding? Is that really a thing? Do people do that?
Gofannon. So Gofannon, like I had mentioned, is a Welsh name for the Celtic smith god Gobinu. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. It translates into divine smith. Gofannon was figured in Irish tradition as one of a trio of divine craftsmen. The other two were Luchta the Right and Credine the metalworker. Gofannon was also the provider of the sacred Otherworld feast, which was known as the Fled Gobenhin. He allegedly brewed a special ale that was thought to confer immortality to those who drank it. Later in Christian times, he became known as Goban Sair, Goban the Joiner. who was a legendary builder of churches and other structures, and as such, he is still remembered in modern Celtic folk tradition. The Welsh equivalent, Gofannon, was actually figured in, I believe it's pronounced Mahabagian, which is a collection of medieval Welsh tales, and it was believed that his help was vital in basically cleaning the plow at the end of the furrows, which is a very important thing in a farming culture, because if you had, back before we had technology that did all this, you would have a plow attached to the back of a horse and you would make furrows. And it was very important to keep those plows clean, those blades clean after you get done with each furrow, to allow you to better keep those lines straight. Because if you kept your lines straight, you could fit more furrows into a field. That's a whole different conversation. That's also equally fascinating in my brain for historical purposes. Let's see. That actually brings us to the Izanagi and Izanami myth. Basically, before I hand this over to Beard, because Beard is probably a little bit more well-versed in this particular vein or genre, what I do know about Izanami and Izanagi is that they were the 8th pair of brother and sister gods to appear after the heaven and earth separated out of the chaos. And they basically created the first landmass with a spear by stirring the ocean.
Right.
And they are also responsible for just a lot of stuff. Just like tons of stuff. And it's actually a really sad story. Like between Izanami and Izanagi. Do you want me to read that one real quick, Beard, or did you have...
Go ahead.
Okay. So basically, after they created the first landmass, this is from the Britannica site that I'll give you guys a link to. It says that the two decided that they wished to unite, also often interpreted as marriage. But their first attempt at the sexual union resulted in a deformed child, Hiroko, it translates to leech child, which is also known in later Shinto mythology as the god Ibusu. And they set him adrift in a boat. Attributing the mistake to a ritual error on the part of Izanami, who as a woman should have never spoken first, they began again and produced numerous islands and deities. In the act of giving birth to the fire god Kagutsuchi, or Hamasubi, Izanami was fatally burned and went to Yomi, the land of darkness. The grief-stricken Izanagi followed her there, but she had eaten the food of that place and could not leave. She became angry when he lit a fire and saw her rotting and covered with maggots. A horrified Izanagi fled with a host of women, and then Izanami herself in pursuit. After reaching the entrance to Yomi, Izanagi placed a stone across it, thus sealing in Izanami and breaking their union. Izanagi bathed in the sea to purify himself from contact with the dead, and as he bathed, the number of deities came into being. The sun goddess Amaterasu was born from his left eye, the moon god Tsukiyomi was born from his right eye, and the storm god Susanoo was born from his nose. That's interesting. In the Shinto religion, Izanagi's bath is regarded as the founding of Harai, the important ritual purification practices of Shinto. So yes.
Yeah.
I find very fascinating the different like body parts that mythology like chooses to focus on. So yeah, it's your storm god because I guess it comes from your nose. I find that really interesting.
Well, I gotta say, for a good majority of like if you go from like place to place and whatnot, they focus on different parts of the body and different rites as well.
True.
In particular, like Norse focus so much on the eyes, thanks to Odin and whatnot, especially. But if you look further into like the Japanese, of course, they'll as some will probably look at me funny for this one all the same, but like the Yakuza stories and whatnot about taking fingers and so on. That's because they're just very important extremities. You know, you screw up and that's basically what it comes down to. You effectively kind of lose a finger.
Well, it's the same as the Middle East practice of taking a hand for thieving.
Yep. I gotta say, it's just you do something that is counter to your master, to his will, or something to that effect, and you're going to lose something. If you're an affront to the gods, you're going to lose something. Just stuff of that nature that until you get into Taoism a little bit more, where things are a little bit more laid back, it's not quite as open as it possibly could be. Granted, Confucianism is still about this striving to be better and for betterment and so on anyway, but I digress. What you summed up, though, between the two of them really kind of summates the whole basic understanding between them. There's of course more to the story, but if I start getting into more of the story, I think we're going to be here for a lot longer than probably intended. But for what we're concerned with Izanami and Izagami, both of them are just about like the creation and the death of life and so on. Which, quite frankly, if you need, I think, a very good representation of the entire story behind all of that, just go watch Princess Mononoke. Hayao Miyazaki basically crafted almost the entirety of that story based off of that entire function. Like, how much does our will and how we strive and so on bandage into that of life itself. And that's why creation, and funny enough, of course, they use a forge within Princess Mononoke as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But that entirety is just based off of that entire function of that whole story. So really just kind of summing up like the basis, I think, is frankly enough for that, without getting too far into the story. And again, so many other tales kind of spurned from that, as I mentioned with Masamune and Masamune, both of those being created by legendary swordsmiths. So yeah, just a very important tale for Japan as a whole, but more so for East Asia culture especially. But yeah, it's quoted, continues to be quoted like day in, day out by many other either animes or otherwise. Another one, granted, is a little bit deeper, but if anybody remembers Bife going on about the creation of the Isle in Monster Hunter when he was on, that's another basis. There's plenty of others that kind of fit back into it. Anyway, before I keep going on this, yeah, it's that important of a tale because it shows itself in so many different ways.
Yeah, and to kind of explain the exchange that Bife and Deej had about the quote about the 1,000 and then 1,500, that was it took place after Izanagi escaped from, I believe the full name is Yomi no Kuni, I believe is the full word or full term for the underworld. But after he escaped from Yomi and had sealed that entrance, Izanami basically threatened Izanagi, saying that she would kill 1,000 people every day, and his rebuttal or his reply was that he would father 1,500 children for every 1,000 she killed. And then after this, it's said that Izanagi pronounced the formula of divorce, and then he went and purified himself by cleansing himself. From what's described as the miasma of Yomi no Kuni. So that's where that particular exchange that if you follow Bife or Deej or anyone on Twitter, or you're on Twitter at all, that particular quote, that's where that kind of comes in, is after Izanagi had been sent to the underworld and had eaten, which is very Persephone and Hades-esque, which you'll see a lot of, like I said, you're going to see a lot of parallels here. After that exchange.
Sorry.
No. Go for it.
I think that's actually why they decided to choose the cultures that they did as well. Like,
yeah, they're very interchangeable.
Extremely.
The other thing that really strikes me is Izanami is very Orpheus.
Yeah.
The whole story is very, very Orpheus-like, which, that's we have a direct nod to Orpheus with the Orpheus rigs. And so Izanami is very much presented in that light as well. And even that entire exchange between Izanagi and Izanami it's much more dark and much more violent than the Orpheus myth. But the overall concept of don't look back and escaping the underworld and not being able to rescue the wife that the hero was searching for is very similar. Now the ending is very different because Orpheus obviously did not divorce himself from I just blanked on his wife's name, and actually ended up getting himself killed because he was in such a depressed state, whereas Izanami went on to, kind of divorce from Izanagi to the point where he also was basically in direct confrontation to her destructive nature. His creative nature would try to overpower that destructiveness, which is also another interesting thing, that the forge is Izanami and it's not Izanagi. So Izanami is the creative force that is overpowering the Izanagi, the destructive force. And so again, kind of going back into that forge there, you're actually looking at a creation. You're looking at something that is creating, even though it's creating something that is going to be destroyed or is going to be destructive, it is still introducing something new, which is a really, really cool name thing there.
That still, I think, comes back down to also the build, if you will, of Black Armory and Henriette's original motives for creating it, because she wanted to have a force for life more than anything, because she, again, just felt that the Traveler wasn't going to be the thing to do it. Same with all of the others that kind of came together for said Black Armory. I know that dips a little bit more into the papers a little bit, but the ideas behind it is just here is what we are attempting to create and attempting to do for humanity as a whole, and what we continue to strive for on a typical basis is for that creation of life and whatever that may entail. If it is just a creation of items that can be used for protective good, or if it is a thing that can be as kind of it turned into, as we sort of know from the later days of the collapse, more into a destructive measure. And that's the dichotomy. Again, that's the whole force of what we're kind of talking about here, is that dichotomy of what weapons are kind of all about. God, plenty of other stories that deal with that topic all the same, but
well,
just to kind of translate that a little more.
And the interesting thing, Dino brought this up in chat too, is Izanami is the forge, and one of the weapons that Izanami is attached to is Izanagi's burden, which is the sniper rifle. Yep. So we do have that I don't know if dichotomy is the right word for it, but I feel like it is, that give and take relationship there present as well. Yeah,
I'll go with give and take. That's a very well way to put it, I think.
And then I believe, Tear of Izanami is the emblem.
Tear of Izanami, yeah.
So, and so that brings us to Volundr. And now Volundr, I had mentioned, is a really fascinating one. And let me pull this up because I had so much fun reading about Volundr. Mostly because Volundr is not a deity. He's just a blacksmith who
dude.
He is, but then I keep getting the sense that he's like a demigod as well, because of some of the stuff that he pulls off. So again, this is actually
he's a Kratos.
Oh my gosh, he's freaking awesome, is what he is. Depressing as all get out. But so the story that I'm going to read right here is actually from a site called pantheon.org. It's part of the Encyclopedia Mythica website group. I'll include the link for you guys as well. If you guys have any other links, as always, give me a shout and I'll put them up in the show notes. So Volundr is described as a legendary master blacksmith. He is attested in the Epic poem, which is based, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. The poems, let's just do that. The Epic poems.
I said the same thing.
I don't even recognize some of these letters. I'm just going to put that there. So Volundr and his brothers Egil and Slagfjord, I believe is the pronunciation there, were the sons of a Finnish king. Like I've said, they've each married a Valkyrie. And then their wives disappeared after 9 winters. So they've been married for about 9 years, and then their wives just disappear. So his brothers set out to pursue him, but Volundr stays behind in a location called Ulfdalir, which translates into Wolfdales, to await his wife's return. And while he was waiting, he fashioned 700 rings from red gold and strung those on ropes of bast. And so he's busy goldsmithing, basically. He's keeping himself busy. However, a king finds out that he's doing this and comes after his gold. And he's basically searching for him, and then he finds out that Volundr is basically home alone. He doesn't have his brothers with him. So the king, I believe it's Nidudru? I don't even know. Nidu. Let's just go with Nidu, because that's all I'm going to go. He sends all his warriors to the smith's home. There they found all the rings, but they only took one, leaving the rest behind. So he had been out hunting. And when he comes home, he returns home from hunting, he counts the rings, and he finds one is missing. And his first thought is that his wife had returned and taken it. So he waited, but then he fell asleep. And when he woke up, Nidur's men had returned and kidnapped him. So this goes on, and they basically bring him to their king. The king gives his daughter the golden ring, and then the king, takes Volundr's sword. And this is like the best reaction ever, is described in verse 16 of this poem, and its quote is, "His teeth he shows when the sword he sees, and Bolvid's ring he recognizes. Threatening are his eyes as a glistening serpent's, let be severed his sinews' strength, and set him then in Svavstad." So Volundr was hamstrung and then imprisoned on the small island of Svavstad. And basically, while he was in prison there, he was basically told that he had to forge all these jewelries for Nidur. And so he was forging all these jewels, and no one was allowed to visit him, save the king. And after some years, he had managed to pursue two of the king's 2 youngest sons to come visit him alone, basically promising them gold. And so he promises them gold if they come back. And so they come back, and he cuts off their heads and then hides their bodies under the bellows, which is part of the forge. And then their skulls he takes, and he sets them in silver and sends them to the king. And from their eyes he takes their eyes and fashions gems, and then gives them to the king's wife. And then their teeth he bakes into 2 brooches and gives them to the king's daughter, who was the one who had gotten the ring. And so, and this kind of, just fair warning, this kind of gets graphic. So the daughter comes to the island because the ring that they had stolen is broken, and she needs it repaired. And Volundr basically knocks her out with alcohol, and then has his way with her. And like, this is only in Norse mythology does this make any sense. So Volundr, who is now pregnant with his child, flees. And then, so the king manages to track down Volundr and ask what becomes of his 2 young sons. And in response, Volundr makes the king swear that no matter what, he will not harm his wife, the Valkyrie. Once he gets that oath, he then proceeds to tell the king precisely what he had done to his family, and then, laughing in the king's face, vengeance complete, he uses a pair of wings that he had designed while he was trapped on this island and escapes. He just flies away. And that's the end. Like, I was just like, what? Like I said, this guy is like reading this myth was just like, I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is the weirdest thing. This is like every Norse mythology. If you want to read some really interesting ones, go read the stories of Loki and Thor. Like, it's just They're weird, but they're
Mhm.
entertaining, and especially if you can get a hold of like the actual poetry, it's just, I don't know, like they had such a really interesting way of presenting this stuff. So yeah, but Volundr, in the long story short, he's a master smith, so it makes sense that we have a forge named after him, right?
No, that's the only thing he's really good at, right? Just the
Yeah,
master smith
yeah.
part. Okay.
He can make stuff out of everything, because apparently he can make gems out of eyeballs. I mean, that's pretty nifty.
So that's where Odin's eye went.
No, Odin's. Oh gosh,
Yeah,
Odin's eye. That's a whole
Just
different
kidding.
story.
I'm just kidding. I know. I just wanted to make a joke and trigger some people.
He's kind of an a-hole.
Gee, might be why people don't like Helga all that much.
But
I
to
wonder.
be fair, I mean, like, in slight defense of his a-holeness on this, like, this was all done in like reaction to his stuff being stolen, him being kidnapped, and then they hamstring him in and put him on an island and force him to be their basically slave smith. Like, I mean, all this stuff is done to him, and after all this is done to him, then he starts reacting as revenge. Like, it wasn't until they actually did all this stuff and then they actually imprisoned him. And I think that was to me, that's kind of what seemed to be the final straw, was they actually imprisoned him, which means that he could not get to his wife. Yeah, like, Pins is also pointing out that Volundr is also known as Wayland, which, you know, that's a whole different...
Also known as what, sorry?
Wayland.
Oh, yeah.
Like Wayland the Smith.
Uh-huh, which, don't get me on that. Thinking of another Wayland type instance here that everybody is probably thinking of as well.
What? No, replicators. What?
Which is also interesting because, of course, where did Helga come from?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
which brings me actually to kind of talk about the emblems that we see. So we have the emblems that we have are Gofannon's hammer, Might of Volundr, Steel of Bergusia, and Tear of Izanami. Which actually, you see this in the mythology between these four individuals, or these four entities, I guess would be the best word for it. It kind of lines up, right? You have the Tear of Izanami, which is the sorrow of the loss of Izanagi. The Steel of Bergusia, from what we know about Bergusia, being affiliated with the craft deity, being affiliated with the consort of a god of the smiths, that makes a lot of sense. Volundr, the might of Volundr. I mean, geez, go back 5 minutes and listen to that story again. He's got some might. And then Gofannon's hammer, again, Gofannon is the divine smith. You know, it's very obviously the smithing is very prevalent, obviously, here within the forges, being named after these specific deities or figures in mythology. But that actually brings me really to the Niobe labs and the mythology between Niobe. I don't know. I don't really have anything final for Volundr tying back into the specific forge unit itself. I don't know if you guys, if Beard or if Green, if you had anything that stood out to you for that.
Not entirely. I mean, what should be kind of pointed out, I guess, with Volundr as part of like the area that it's in too. It's the one that also has a lot of those hidden messages and whatnot hanging around.
Which to get the emblems.
Yep.
Well, and isn't that the one with the lockbox?
Yeah.
Yes. There's a lockbox that's kind of off to the bridge that you cross that's broken when you initially go in. It's below and to the right of it a little ways.
Yep. And I'm working on that as we speak. But
nice.
Yeah, it is one of those big differences about it versus the other forges, because I don't think that stuff is anywhere else. It's literally only found with the Volundr forge, which is as a mainstay. I'm kind of interested on that one, on why that is, but
there is there's another code type thing to unlock so you have the exotic box that you get from Ada.
Yeah.
Or working to unlock. There's another thing you unlock from Gofannon.
Yeah.
But it's not as extensive as the Volundr, which I want to know if the message that we use to unlock the emblems, if there's something to it besides just the letters. Because
I wonder.
Is the Volundr, because Volundr is where you get Hammerhead, right?
Yes.
Hammerhead. Yeah.
Is Hammerhead the one that if you look down, if you ADS, you can see the code, the symbols? Okay.
For one of them, because you actually have to use the sniper for another one. And
I'm assuming Izanagi's burden is to Izanami's forge, right?
No, I don't know. You use what sniper I have? The Taranta. What is it called? Pull it up real quick.
You're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not Izanagi's burden.
No, you don't use that one. You use the Tatera gaze to do this one of the emblems, and then there's a third one that you'd use, but I didn't have it when somebody actually drugged me through and got all the emblems for me. I was just like, thanks.
Dino gave us Hammerhead, Tatera's gaze, and the Spiteful Fang.
There you go. Okay.
Thank you, Dino. Dino actually just also gave me a little tidbit. There's a man, excuse me. Volundr's emblem has a variant design, and that design is called the Vengeance of Volundr.
Interesting.
It's a deadly thing. But yeah, and I believe, if I remember correctly, the symbols, at least I know from the Hammerhead, they were quotes from the Poetic Edda? Was it the Poetic Edda? Okay.
Yeah.
Which is just really cool. I love seeing that type of stuff.
Myron's Vision has a quote too, which is I want to say it's the Izanami emblem, but I'd have to double check to see which one it's from.
Dino just gave us Vengeance of Volundr, Gofannon's Fire, and the Blood of Izanami are all the variants. Which that makes sense. Again. So again, I mean, just tying back into these just these awesome myths with these different forges, I really, really appreciate and really love seeing this type of kind of nod to actual mythology in games. And that really kind of brings me to the Niobe Labs and Project Niobe. So real quick, in regards to Destiny, before I get into the really fun one about the mythology, Project Niobe was a project that allied the Black Armory with Clovis Bray. And basically the idea was to bring Exoscience Project to Earth at last, and eventually the entire project was basically to create a device called the Obsidian Accelerator. This object was originally actually contained within the exo body of Ada 1. And before her death, however, Henriette removed the device in an attempt to save Ada 1 from Risen, who sought the power that it held. And so we kind of see this kind of bittersweet story being laid out in the Black Armory papers. And I really encourage you guys, if you haven't read it, go to Ishtar and read them, because it is, I remember reading it through the first time, and it's such a gut punch. Like, there are so many emotions going into that story. It was really well done.
It's definitely one you want to read again as well.
Oh gosh, yeah.
It's a very well told story. Granted, it pulls from a lot of different areas, but it's a very well done one. If you guys have not read it yet and you're looking for something to kind of wind down with after now that the holidays are kind of getting there, that is easily one to kind of take a look at for sure. And they're completely out on the internet. You can find them 100%. They're not spoiler territory anymore. You can even go and get them all at this point too if you have the expansion and you want them. So there is that.
It's the best thing that I can relate it to is I think Icehawk mentioned it too. It's very similar to The Road. If you guys haven't read that story, I really encourage you actually to read it. That's another story that is very, I will be 100% transparent, very difficult to read because of the emotions that are involved in it. But amazing piece of work. Yes. So that and to be also clear, we do not have access to the Obsidian Accelerator in game currently. So that piece of, I think Dino referred to it as Ada's superpower. That particular piece of equipment is not currently accessible. It's a possibility that we will see that being brought back, but we don't know yet.
It still brings up the question of who the heck has it.
Right, yeah. I mean, like, because the last we see of it, we don't know that yet. And yeah, and chat right now is talking about Ada's response when you finally do collect all the pages in game, because the final page is actually a letter to Ada, and it's very, very cool little conclusion, I guess, wrapping up closure.
You say cool, I say punch.
Well,
to the teeth,
I mean,
you know,
there's
right.
I mean,
measures to that.
To be fair, I described initially it as a punch in the gut. Like, I mean, it's not like it. It's nice to see that type or that closure element involved, because right now we don't have a lot of that closure in a lot of these stories, and so and to be fair, it's not 100% closed, right? It's just it's an acknowledgement of loss, and it's acknowledgement of the pain and the suffering that this particular character did go through. And I think the cool thing that the Black Armory papers do, and really the Black Armory in general does, is it takes the perspective of humanity during the collapse. And it presents the picture that we have kind of been given and kind of seen from various different guardians and risen, and people of note within the city. We've all seen this stuff. We've all been given this information from this particular perspective, and now we're being given another perspective. We're kind of being given a different angle of the events, and a grittier angle, really. I mean, the events in the paper kind of don't. I mean, it explains why Ada has the reaction she does to us in the beginning of the Black Armory. You're right. I don't really want to call it expansion, but the story that gets introduced there.
You can call it an expansion. It's fine. It pretty much is.
It's an end-game expansion.
Yeah. Well, the joke was also already made that it's longer than Warmind in some cases with some of the missions that were.
As far as the grind, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the grind is longer than Warmind itself, which I find funny. Even considering the time gating and whatnot, like I still think it's a very well done expansion. I'll be the first to just call it that. Anyway, I'm getting completely off topic.
Right,
here.
and then in the chat, Dino and chat are talking about the other thing that this does is it gives us an actual first person account of what's going on, which I still want to know what those creatures are.
Yeah.
I have my theory, but then my theory got pushed aside. There were different theories.
Yeah, there's plenty of good little theories you can go off there. I don't know. There's a couple reports I can think back on that make me think on what it might be. But that might be just me. I don't know.
Well, hey, before we wrap up the Forge, you did say you had some Spinfoil thoughts on the Forges. Did you want to drive into that real quick?
All right. You want me to do that? Sure.
Yeah.
So one of them is kind of simplified. One of them is taking things at face value. I had to look at a certain enemy type before I came to this conclusion, but it was like almost immediately the connection was made, and it was with the Izanami forge that I had kind of thought about this. There's the I think that both of you have seen like what the forges look like and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Ada even has one, of course, hanging up in her room, which I find is kind of funny. That she has an inactive one, or at least the blueprint prototype for one, just hanging there. So it's very easy to like look at this thing and spot it. Problem is that there's this other, like I said, enemy type that exists that I find funny that they don't really want to associate themselves with Clovis Brayon. Thinking back on another group that really didn't want to consult with or bring themselves together with Clovis Bray too much. And again, it ties all together. I'll stop beating around the bush so much here. The creature that I am referring to is a harpy. If you look at a harpy when it's in stationary style, where it's just kind of like looking up at the sky and whatnot, its wings kind of opened and sort of pointed down. Mm-hmm. Flip it upside down, and you have a forge.
Okay, I'm following you.
So I am wondering if they didn't have some kind of Vex tech that they took from for the Black Armory, which would also tie in with some of the weaponry that also kind of exists within how like Hammerhead and whatnot is kind of utilized. It's hard to see, but when you go to reload Hammerhead, you flip up the top of the gun, or actually flip back, I'm sorry, and then inside there's like a coil. And that coil almost reminds me very much of what we had actually seen a little bit with Abaddon, and then also with Nova Mortis. I also look at the base design for Hammerhead, and of course the frame itself is still very Thunderlord, which granted it's an LMG. Of course they're going to look somewhat similar,
right?
But I am wondering, in some regard, some way, shape, or form, if they don't have some kind of connection with some sort of Vex tech, or that wasn't in any way intentional. But that initial design kind of piqued my interest. It would also give reason for why the Vex are kind of interested in them, because they're the only race that I can think of, or species I can think of, that it doesn't make a lot of sense that they would be very interested in the Black Armory forges for at all. They're this weird, malignant thing that's kind of sitting on Nessus that they're trying to integrate, and they end up protecting it instead. I found the means behind that very weird for why the Vex would do that. So I'm wondering if they don't see it as some type of Vex tech that is somewhat integrated with different systems, which still pans back to how, again, Ada is created and so on as well, because she's the Black Armory version of an Exo. She's not an Exo as what we're used to seeing. So Ada herself is also a bit of an affront to the typical notions of what we have seen day in, day out.
Right.
And I think that's also a reason her entire existence, I think, is questionable, like how she's able to get past things like DER as much as she is, being that she is still Ada 1 at this point. And I think that has a lot to do with the ways that she was kind of constructed and put together. And again, if it's a culmination of Vex Tech versus like Hive technology in a way, with the way that they kind of utilized the how possibly Clovis Bray Exo were utilizing some of the World's Grave technology, if you will, mm-hmm. and the Black Armory were utilizing some things for how Vex were built up and whatnot, which is funny because I think that's why I like the Black Armory a little bit more, because they have like some silly, weird relation it feels almost to Future War Cult. Anyway, that's kind of my main spinfoil for that. It's all just a visual joke, if you will, but it's the best visual joke I can kind of think of.
The thing that I was having a conversation with some of the clan members about was the whole Ada. You kind of sort of mentioned it with her avoidance of having to do any sort of resets. The fact that she is Ada 1.
Right. Well,
the debate.
And I think that has to do a lot with the basis in DER and how she is put together, etc. If you guys are not picking up on it, you'll figure this stuff out in the Black Armory papers. But if you want to avoid any kind of spoilers here, then skip through it. Okay, I think I've given enough time. The main idea, of course, is that she was a kid, and her main being may very well have been scrapped, or she just had questions based on like how she was. But in addition to that, she was also comatose.
Right.
So we don't know what kind of memory degradation may have happened, being that she was in her comatose state. She got hit on the head pretty significantly, in fact. So I don't know. That's the questions that I've kind of been having too, is like why she was able to. Well, it's probably a mix between her being young and, of course, the comatose.
Well, I was actually, one of the theories that we were talking about is the fact that we were talking about how Helga wanted to incorporate Black Armory technology into the Clovis Bray tech.
Mm-hmm.
The theory that we were coming up with was it's quite possible that they improved upon the exotech essentially by incorporating the Black Armory tech into it.
Right.
And basically made a better exo than what even Clovis Bray did.
Yeah, but the ideas of better exo comes down to being a better tool.
Right.
That's really where that kind of culminates in the whole gray area of the the whole gray area with exos in general.
Right.
But they really just kind of grab that idea and run with it. They go completely amok with it. But yeah, that's kind of my thinking on it too. Like they're creating it through knowledge of what they've done with the Black Armory, and of course, having the Obsidian Accelerator placed inside of Ada might have a little something to do with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It could have a lot to do with how she's able to not go through the functions or so on of DER or have to suffer through it. It could also be that it was a product of the rush job that they needed to do with Niobe and whatnot. That they didn't really have a lot of time to do anything. But I think we do get confirmation here as well about the base creation of at least Ada, unless it was Helga's remains that were buried within the Black Armory papers, that the human self does not exist after an exo is created as well. I think that's at least half confirmed at this point. I don't want to call it confirmed, but it feels like it's pretty well confirmed.
Right.
But yeah, I think with the creation of Ada, just in general, just the way that she is, of course, as an exo, there are plenty of speculated thoughts that you can have on her creation as a whole. I'm just wondering if there isn't, again, some kind of... just the way that Ada looks, the way the forges are put together, the way that there is a thing called the Obsidian Accelerator, and that you're pretty well accelerating time structures, makes me wonder if a good majority of the stuff that they have within the Black Armory is in some way, shape, or form related to Vex technology in some way. There are too many visual cues that kind of showcase it. The base looks of each of the Black Armory crests also kind of go along with a lot of Vex imagery. There's just a lot of like these little handholds and pass-offs that I think have been happening with Black Armory that possibly showcase a link up with Vex Tech more than anything else. But I don't know. It's a thought.
Yeah.
It's a thought.
I like how it leads into more questions.
Yep. Because it also still too with something else that I mentioned before, and if you've been on the show for a little while now, you know where I'm kind of going with this as well. But like Daito being the suppliers of civilian weaponry, being a large reminiscent idea for me for ages now. And we come to find that a good majority may have actually been supplied from these forges and the Black Armory and so on. Kind of opens up the doors to like a bit of a turf war, if you will. It also still makes up a large question of like some of the other creations that exist within the Black Armory with the weaponry and so on that we see. Like Graviton Lance, for example, was made, I think, in or found in the Chicago Dead Zone. I don't have it on me, so I can't remember off the top of my head. It's either Chicago or Detroit, I can't remember. But the construction of that weapon seems very similar to a good majority of the construction that we see with some of the Black Armory weapons in general. Again, I lean back towards like Kindled Orchid and Hammerhead and their overall construction. Them playing with the Void, them playing with Arc, them playing with Solar before they were even realistically a factor in how... yes, he says sounds like Detroit. Them playing with these elements as like a factor as they are before we have Guardians and before we have Risen and so on, kind of just says that they had a better handle on the element status of what the Traveler brought us without having to utilize the Traveler, which still pans back to other thoughts that perhaps the break-off unit of the Arcology had some link up with what was going on with the Black Armory as well. Like the Black Armory could be any number of relations back to how humanity was trying to grow, but it could have just been a cog in the wheel versus the actual thing that moved all the pieces. If we look at again, like the Yang La Wei and what I was saying before and kind of hinting at, it's quite possible that the Yang La Wei had a good majority, like a few of these Black Armory forges on it. And if they were able to construct a lot of these, of the weapons that they had for the Awoken from these Black Armory forges, then they can also carry on and do what they need to. They're also not a product of the Traveler. They're a product of humankind. They could have gotten loaded onto the thing. There's all these little bits and pieces that they've had their hands in, and I think that's what fascinates me so much about them. It's that they were a group within the collapse that we didn't know about until recently because they chose to keep themselves hidden, and there's really only one member left out of this entire organization. It could also explain why some of the other weaponry that we have, like Amalon or Weist or whatnot, also comes to fruition and comes and pops up out of nowhere. They are able to utilize these technologies that they found in these weapons that they weren't able to decode or figure out previous, and it turns out that most of them are actually created and meshed with thanks to Black Armory. It really is kind of that missing link. That's why I think that this whole expansion is so important as it kind of is, which is ironic because I think that this is almost like a history lesson or a bridging point. I would argue to say that this is more important than a good majority of the stuff that we've gotten recent.
I would agree with that. I mean, there's still a lot of really important stuff, but this is the most revealing when it comes to humanity right at the collapse, essentially.
Yeah.
I can't wait till we actually dive into the papers themselves.
Yeah. I've been skirting around that a little bit too much here, I think, tonight, but yeah.
I mean, it's hard to talk about the Black Armory without talking about Ada, and the papers are all about Ada in some ways. So, if you haven't read them, you should.
It's worth it.
Yes.
I kind of feel like I needed to leave those. There were 4 books that were unreleased, and I feel like that was the one that I wanted to leave for last. Mm-hmm. Because it had, I think, the greatest impact on me as I was reading it.
The other thing is it's not a difficult book to read.
No, it's fairly straightforward. I like how the the breakdown is within the book itself. Like they have different entry points, so it's really easy to just go from like entry 1, entry 2, entry 3 within within the lore entries themselves. So it kind of helps. It also helps with the way that like time is formulated. I'm still not entirely sure how long that period of time is, because there's actually a portion where
there's quite a bit missing too.
Yeah, well, there's also like a lot that like Henriette just kind of like let go for a while. She didn't report back or talk about anything for a bit. So like we're still kind of contemplating on age, but it confirms a lot of things about like how the Risen started to appear, and how like the days right after the collapse had started, how some of that went down. So if you've been looking for a lot of those questions to be like partially answered or again some bridge points, this is the book to read. I think that's what has me as excited about it as it does. It's just the amount of information that we have that you can kind of like start to piece through and pick at. That really makes me wonder how much further they want to go with it, or how much further we may get along with it. And in addition to that, I really hope that they make Ada a mainstay character as we go into Destiny 3 or anything else that pops up. Just because I really do think that she's a very worthwhile character as a whole. Has a lot that she can still teach us and offer us, especially story-wise. But just like the Black Armory, how everything's put together, I really hope they continue with this. And I don't think I am alone in that regard.
I don't think you are, but I also think that might be a good place to start wrapping up.
I think so too.
And I mean, like, to be clear also for everyone, this was meant to be a summary episode too. So, you know, we're still learning about the Black Armory. Obviously in game, we're still learning and being shown new pieces pretty much every week, it feels like. So I definitely expect us to come back to the Black Armory. And like I said, there is an option on the polls to go over the Black Armory pages, which I know like Green and Beard have just been kind of going back and forth for here recently. It's a big subject right now, because it's a fresh introduction to a new way of looking at the information that we have. But I guess real quick, guys, do you guys have any shout outs for this last week or this episode? Green?
Beard, go first.
Oh,
okay.
Beard.
Major one is honestly Happy New Year. It is, as we are recording this now, it has turned for me to New Year's Eve. So I hope you all have an absolutely safe and wonderful New Year. If you are going to be under the influence, please do so responsibly and so on, or rather, you'll hear this after the fact, but you know what I mean. But I hope that you guys had a great New Year, and for those live, you know, be safe, be careful, etc. I feel like people do dumb things around this time of year just because they think that they can, and that's really not the case. But anyway, the other thing too is, as we're kind of winding down with this year, I don't personally do a lot of like New Year's resolutions and whatnot. I really do think they're kind of stupid. But one thing that I do, at least, I'm not saying you're stupid if you follow them, by the way. Like, if you can keep to them, great. I feel like if you're going to do something, do it for yourself, not do it on a day. Anyway, just to explain myself a little bit on that one. What I typically do, though, is I sit back and I count my blessings on everything that's happened over the past year. And I would say that this is probably one of the most blessed years that I have had in quite a long time. Last year was a big one with kind of like starting out the channel and getting involved here a little bit more. But outside of like some of the woes and issues that I've had, 2018 kicked me in the teeth and punched me in the gut, I think, a little bit more often than I would have liked it to. But I'm still here. I still have my family. My dog is in relatively good health. I have somebody else that I am absolutely enjoying their company. There are so many things that actually came out of 2018 that were wonderful. And I hope that you guys can kind of sit back and do the same thing, to just kind of collect your thoughts and kind of going into the new year. Sit back and kind of think about what it is that you hope will still be with you, and to make it happen as you go along as well. Just typical thing that I almost always have. But be good to each other. Sit back and think about what it is that you wanted to change over 2018. Make little steps, make big steps, make whatever things you think of. But just be safe and happy in 2019, guys.
Great shout out. I love it. Green, what about you?
We're still kind of echoing the Beard a little bit. We're still in a very stressful season for a lot of people. And so if there are people I hope that you are not stressed and that you are finding ways to de-stress that are safe and good, and reaching out to people if you need to. But the other thing is, if you are somebody who is not as stressed as others, reach out to somebody that you may not have talked to in a while, because sometimes those kind of reach outs help de-stress them a little bit and just let them know that other people are looking out for them and keeping an eye on them a little bit, even if it's just a, hey, how's it going? How's your day been? Type stuff. It really makes a big difference in a lot of people's lives whenever they are just feeling alone. And this is that time of year where a lot of people tend to feel alone. So that's more of my shout out, is just, if you are not somebody who generally reaches out to somebody, just pick one person, mom, dad, if you don't talk to them very often, sister, whoever. Mm-hmm. Just drop them a note or just message them or something real quick. Doesn't have to be a 45-minute long conversation. Even something simple and small can make a big difference.
Yep. 5 minutes is sometimes enough just to remind somebody that they're cared for, quite frankly.
All right, guys, and like I guess Beard and Green have both covered all the shout-outs that I was going to give you guys. So basically, from us to you, we hope you guys have had a great holiday season. Hope you guys, by the time you hear this on the podcast, it will be 2019. So welcome to the new year. Hope you guys are having a great year so far. And we will be talking to you guys next week. I believe we're going to try to get back on the regular schedule of Friday evenings for the live stream. I believe this week I'm going to try to maybe stream a little bit since I have some remaining free time. No promises though. But I think that's going to be one of the things that I try to start working back in, is a little bit of more streaming during the week if I can. But we'll see how that goes. But as always, you guys have a great week. You have hopefully, like Beard and Green have already said again, hope you guys have a great New Year's Eve, and a new year is off to a great start with you. And we will talk to you guys next week. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Links to our episode archives can be found at www.focusfirechat.com. Please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any comments or questions for our team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. Also, be sure to check out all of our amazing partner podcasts within the Guardian Radio Network over on theguardiansofdestiny.com. So until next time, focus your fire, and may your light shine bright.